I was sitting in a cramped office break room last week when a colleague showed me a grainy video of a street protest on his phone. His reaction was visceral. His knuckles were white, his eyes darting across the screen as he whispered, "About time someone finally stood up to them." For the next 10 minutes, he dissected every injustice, from the new labor laws to the rising cost of living, with a sharp, analytical fury. He looked like a man ready to march, but then the floor manager walked in, the very person who had just implemented a series of unfair overtime rules. The transformation was instantaneous. The fire in my colleague's eyes didn't just dim, it vanished. He didn't offer a critique, he offered a submissive, practiced smile. He bowed his head just a fraction of an inch, avoided eye contact, and politely asked if the manager needed help with the afternoon reports. There was no transition, no visible internal struggle, just a seamless automatic shift back into the role of the loyal subordinate. That moment of total silent surrender was more jarring than the protest video itself. It was a display of an ancestral reflex, a deep-seated habit of bowing when we should be staring back. It left me wondering, why does the act of questioning feel like a social sin here? Why is protest treated like a foreign language we were never permitted to study, while silence is elevated to a moral virtue? As it turns out, this isn't a genetic trait of being polite. It is the result of a meticulously designed curriculum of silence. From the classroom to the boardroom, we have been trained to view ourselves as spectators rather than participants. We're living in the long, cold shadow of a regime that taught us that a good citizen is one who votes for 5 minutes every 5 years and stays perfectly quiet for the rest of them. We aren't just unpracticed in the art of protest, we've been systematically detrained to speak up.
That image it's incredibly powerful. The speed of it, that instantaneous switch from, revolutionary fire to
It's complete subservience.
to total submission. It's not a conscious choice at that point, is it? It's a reflex. It's like your hand pulling back from a hot stove. It's just built in.
It felt like muscle memory. And that's what sent me down this rabbit hole. I started pulling all this research because I wanted to connect that moment, that very human, very small moment in a break room, to the big picture.
Right.
I wanted to ask, what does that reflex actually do to a country? Does it matter? Is it just, a cultural quirk, this idea of being polite and non-confrontational? Or is it a fundamental piece of our national machinery?
And that's the core question we're digging into today, because you're right. We often just label it culture. We say, oh, that's just how things are here, very harmonious. But when you look at the stack of material we have in front of us, we're talking academic studies on foreign direct investment, deep socio-political critiques of what's being called the new developmental state, analyses of state capacity. You realize this isn't about etiquette, it's mechanical. This silence is an active component. It's a gear in the engine.
It's a curriculum. That's the phrase that just stuck with me. A curriculum of silence. And for this deep dive, I want to see the report card. What are the results of this curriculum? What happens when you graduate an entire nation of people trained to be quiet?
So we're going to trace the consequences.
We're going to trace it through 3 specific lives. We've got an infrastructure project, a factory floor, and a mass demonstration. We're going to see how this culture of silence collides with economics, with governance, with cold, hard reality.
Through the stories of Hendra, Dewey, and Risky.
Exactly. And I think we have to start with Hendra. His story is where this idea of silence stops being a philosophical concept and starts having a price tag. A very, very expensive price tag.
This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of state capacity.
Okay. Hendra lives in a regency in Sumatra. It's not Jakarta, it's not a remote village, it's just a regular developing part of the country. And for as long as he can remember, there's been this promise of a big new highway, a national strategic project.
The silver bullet, the thing that's supposed to fix everything.
The thing that's going to bring progress. It'll cut down travel time for goods, it'll connect them to the main ports, it'll bring jobs. And Hendra was a true believer. When they finally broke ground, he was thrilled. He'd even take his son down to the construction site on weekends to watch the big machines work.
Mitch, the promise of development made real.
This crucial detail. Hendra isn't just a spectator. He works in construction himself. He's a small-time guy, does residential homes, renovations, that kind of thing. But he knows his materials. He knows what a good concrete mix looks like, what it smells like. He knows good rebar from bad.
So he has ground-level expertise. He has the local knowledge.
And a few months into the project, he starts seeing things that make his stomach turn. The cement slurry being poured for the support pillars, it looks too thin. Too watery, especially for the swampy, monsoon-soaked ground they're building on.
A classic cost-cutting measure: more water, less cement.
And the steel rebar they're putting into the frames, he can see the rust already blooming on it before it even gets set in the concrete. It's been left out in the rain, it's oxidized, it's compromised.
So he's watching a catastrophic failure being built piece by piece in real time. Yeah.
He's standing there, and he's watching this foreman, some guy from the Capitol, in a crisp new safety vest, yelling at the workers to pour faster. And Hendra has this debate raging inside him. He wants to go over, to say something, to just say, hey, listen, that mix is wrong, that steel is no good, this whole section is going to fail.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't, because he hears his father's voice in his head. His dad was a low-level civil servant during the New Order back in the 80s and 90s, and his dad's survival mantra, the lesson he drilled into his kids, was Asal Bapak Senang.
As long as the father is happy.
As long as the boss is happy, you do not question the project. You do not bring bad news up the chain of commands, because if you do, you're not a concerned citizen. You're not a whistleblower. You're a troublemaker. You're an obstacle to development.
You're an enemy of progress.
That's the rhyming. So Hendra stands there, he swallows his words, he watches them pour the bad concrete over the rusted rebar, and he goes home.
And, of course, the project fails.
It fails spectacularly. Before they even finish the full stretch of road, a massive section of the retaining wall just slumped into the swamp after a heavy rainy season. The whole project was halted. It's been tied up in investigations and blame games for years. And now if you go there, it's just a graveyard. A long, sad line of cracked pillars and rusted rebar sticking out of the ground like bones, a monument to silence.
This is such a perfect and tragic textbook example of a failure in state capacity. And we need to be really clear about that term because it's not what most people think it is.
Right. When we hear state capacity, we usually think about money, right? Does the government have the budget to build the road? Or maybe we think about technology. Do they have the right German excavators?
Important. But the real software, the operating system of state capacity, is information. It is the quality and speed of the feedback loop.
On a feedback loop.
Think of the state as a single organism, like a body. The central government in Jakarta, that's the brain. The highway project in Sumatra, that's the hand. Now, if the hand touches a burning hot stove, you need the nerve endings in the fingertips to send an immediate, undeniable signal of pain straight to the brain.
So the brain can pull the hand away before it's severely damaged.
Exactly. In this story, Hendra is the nerve ending. He's the sensory system. He's the only person on the ground with the right expertise and no incentive to lie. The foreman from Jakarta. His bonus depends on finishing on time and under budget. He's incentivized to say everything is fine, the local politician. He's incentivized to report success to his superiors to get more funding.
They're all incentivized to numb the pain signal.
Hendra is the only one sending a true signal. The stove is hot. The concrete is bad. But because of that ancestral reflex, that curriculum of Asal Bapak Senang, the nerve has been conditioned to stay silent. The signal is never sent. And the brain, the state remains blissfully unaware that its hand is burning until the flesh has been cooked through, until the highway has already collapsed.
So the silence doesn't just create a blind spot. It creates a delusion. The state thinks it's competent because no one is telling it that it's failing.
It's a systemic delusion of competence. And one of the papers we looked at, "We are not trained to protest," argues this is by design. It's not an accident. It's a curriculum. It starts in school. When a student in a typical Indonesian classroom points out a factual error the teacher made, what happens?
Oh, it's not good. The student is shamed. They're told not to be insolent, not to be arrogant. It's a challenge to authority.
Right. The act of correcting a fact is framed as a moral failing, insolence. So from the age of 6, you learn that being right is dangerous if it means making a superior look wrong. You learn that harmony is more important than accuracy.
And you graduate a workforce that is terrified of speaking up.
You graduate a nation of Hendras. You build a state that is operating with a severe sensory deprivation disorder. It has arms and legs, but it has no nerves.
And the consequences of that, when you scale it up, are staggering. I was looking at the case study on the Rempang Eco-City project, and it feels like Hendra's story played out on a multi-billion-dollar international stage.
Rempang is the advanced graduate-level course in this exact problem.
So for anyone who hasn't followed this, Rempang is an island near Singapore. The government designated it as the site for a massive new industrial park, an eco-city. anchored by a huge Chinese glass manufacturer.
And crucially, it was labeled a National Strategic Project, or PSN.
And that PSN label is key, isn't it? It's like a golden ticket. It means the project gets to bypass a lot of the usual red tape, the usual consultative processes, all in the name of speed and efficiency. It's the infrastructure first doctrine in action.
The philosophy is that development can't wait for democracy. We need to build now, and we'll sort out the details later.
But the report on this project highlights what it calls infrastructure accountability risk. The whole thing became a case study in how not to do things.
Well, you apply the Hendra dynamic. The central government, the brain, wanted this project badly. It wanted that foreign investment, so it drew up these beautiful master plans in Jakarta. But did it actually engage in a deep, meaningful consultation with the people living on Rempang Island, the local nerve endings?
The report says there was no meaningful public participation.
Because from the perspective of the infrastructure first mindset, public participation isn't a source of valuable information. It's friction. It's a delay. If you actually ask the thousands of people who have lived there for generations what they think, they might say no. They might demand better compensation. They might raise inconvenient truths about ancestral land rights.
So you just skip that step. You operate as if the nerve endings don't exist. The state decided what was best and sent in the bulldozers.
They skipped what the analysis calls integrity due diligence. And what was the outcome? Did they get the speed and efficiency they wanted?
They got protests, they got clashes with the police, tear gas, horrible international headlines about forced evictions and human rights abuses. The lead investor got spooked. The entire project stalled.
Exactly. By enforcing silence at the planning stage, they created a deafening roar of conflict at the execution stage. The very stability they thought they were ensuring by being top-down, they completely destroyed.
Irony. The source points out that the number one thing foreign investors hate is legal uncertainty. And the government thinks that by ignoring local voices, they are creating a stable, predictable environment. Look, we're strong. We can push this through.
But what they're actually doing is hiding landmines. An investor looks at a project like Rempang, and they don't see strength. They see a government that is blind to on-the-ground reality. They see a future of protests, legal challenges, and operational disruptions. The silence, in the end, creates the very uncertainty it was supposed to prevent.
It's a total paradox. A truly high-capacity, strong state isn't one that can force everyone to be quiet. It's one that has the confidence and the systems to listen to criticism, to listen to Hendra, and to adjust his plan before the concrete is poured.
What we have instead is a state that is, as you said earlier, muscular but deaf. It can swing its arms with immense force, but it has no idea what it's about to hit.
Muscular, but deaf. Because I'm turning to the next set of papers, the ones on the economy, and the story gets a lot more complicated.
As it always does.
If this silence is so destructive, if it hollows out state capacity, then why is the economy growing at 5%? Why are the industrial parks on Java booming? We'll bring in our second story. I want to talk about Dewi. Because if Hendra shows us the cost of silence, Dewi shows us the dividend.
The dividend. That's a very pointed and probably very accurate way of framing it.
Dewi is a floor supervisor in one of those massive industrial estates in Cikarang. You know, the ones just endless rows of identical white factories, trucks clogging the toll roads 24/7. She's in an electronics plant, oversees a line of about 50 workers, mostly young women, assembling components for smartphones. She's been there for almost 2 decades.
A lifer. She's seen it all.
And she is deeply, genuinely proud of her factory. She talks about the feeling of rukun on the factory floor. That's the word she kept using. To her, a good day is a smooth day. No arguments, no machine breakdowns, the production targets are met, the Korean managers are happy, and everyone goes home with their wages. Quiet efficiency.
Which, on its face, sounds perfectly reasonable. Who wouldn't want a harmonious workplace?
But you have to understand her history. Dewi was a teenager in 1998, and her family lived right in the middle of the chaos. Her most vivid memory of what she calls politics isn't a debate or an election. It's the smell of burning buildings. It's the terror of the riots. It's watching her father lose his livelihood overnight because the shop where he worked was looted and destroyed.
So for her, political expression is directly linked to economic ruin and physical danger.
Exactly. So now, when the labor unions start talking about organizing a demo, a big protest, blocking the toll road to demand a higher minimum wage, Dewi isn't on board. She's terrified. She actively discourages the younger workers on her line from joining.
She sees protest not as an assertion of rights, but as a direct threat to her own stability.
She literally tells them, don't cause trouble. The Japanese and Korean companies are here because it's stable. If we start blocking roads and making noise, they will leave. They'll go to Vietnam, they'll go somewhere else, and then what? We'll have no jobs at all. To her, silence is a collective survival strategy. And the uncomfortable question, looking at the data, is she wrong?
This is where the conversation gets very difficult because we're moving from anecdotes to hard economic modeling. We have this study, Determinants of Foreign Direct Investment, FDI, in Java Island. And what they did was essentially try to build a mathematical recipe for what makes a foreign company decide to build a factory in Indonesia.
Okay, so what are the ingredients in that recipe?
They looked at everything, the quality of infrastructure, proximity to a big port like Tanjung Priok. Market-sized Java has over half the country's population, so that's a huge factor. But then they looked at the sensitive stuff, labor costs. And they found what economists call a statistically significant negative coefficient for labor costs.
Okay, translate negative coefficient for us.
It's a perfect seesaw. The model shows, with a high degree of confidence, that as labor costs go up, the amount of new FDI coming in goes down. It proves what we intuitively know. These companies are efficiency-seeking. They are chasing low-cost, stable labor.
So Dewey's strategy, her enforcement of silence and harmony, her resistance to strikes that would push up wages, is, from a purely mathematical standpoint, making her region more attractive to foreign capital.
She is personally contributing to a favorable investment climate. Her obedience is a quantifiable economic asset for the state. While good roads are a prerequisite, the variable that investors are most sensitive to is the volatility and cost of labor. If that equation changes, the capital is mobile. It will find a cheaper, quieter place to go.
So Dewey isn't some brainwashed victim. She's making a perfectly rational economic calculation. She is trading her political voice for economic security.
And there's another paper here that adds a fascinating layer to this. It's called Political Risk Indicators and FDI Attraction. It tries to figure out what kind of instability really scares investors, and the answer is not what you'd think.
So?
We tend to think investors are just looking for a perfect, stable, Western-style democracy. But the study found that the big macro variable, political stability and absence of violence, terrorism, didn't actually have a direct, significant correlation with FDI inflows in their model.
Wait, intuitive. Investors don't care if a country is politically stable.
It's not that they don't care, it's that in an emerging market, a certain level of top-level political noise is already priced in. They expect cabinet shuffles, they expect corruption scandals, they expect contested elections. That's just part of the risk profile.
So that's just background noise to them.
It's a background noise. But what they found did have a strong, positive, significant effect on FDI were two other variables, regulatory quality and government effectiveness.
Okay, so what's the practical difference between political stability and government effectiveness for a factory manager?
Government effectiveness is brutally simple. Does the electricity stay on? Can my trucks get from the factory to the port without being stopped? Are my permits processed in a predictable way? You can have a massive political crisis brewing in the capital, but if the widgets are still getting loaded onto ships in Cikarang, the investor is relatively happy.
So a protest that blocks the toll, Roe Dewey's greatest fear, is not a political stability problem. It's a government effectiveness problem.
It's a direct hit to effectiveness. It gums up the entire supply chain. It's the specific type of disruption that immediately impacts the bottom line. So Dewey's intuition is spot on. She can ignore the political drama she sees on TV. But a protest outside her factory gates, that is an existential threat.
So her pursuit of rukun, of harmony, is precisely what keeps that government effectiveness score high. She is the human shock absorber for the global supply chain.
It's a collective survival strategy, as you said. The factory workers, in her view, are all in the same lifeboat. And the #1 rule in a lifeboat is, don't rock it.
Even if the person steering the boat is taking the biggest share of the rations.
Because the perceived alternative being thrown into the chaotic sea of 1998 is infinitely worse.
Okay, so we have this deep tension now. Hendra's silence is corroding the state's ability to function and build. But Dewey's silence is the lubricant for the manufacturing economy that the state depends on. It feels like the entire system is structured to reward Dewey's behavior and punish Hendra's.
It seems that way. Silence is punished in one domain and rewarded in another.
But people aren't always silent. This isn't a country of 270 million Deweys. We have these massive explosions of voice, protests involving millions of people.
But the question we have to ask next is, what do those explosions actually achieve? Do they fix the problems that Hendra sees? Or are they something else entirely?
This brings us to Risky.
Our third narrative.
Risky is the guy who broke the curriculum. He didn't stay quiet. He was a passionate participant in the 212 movement.
The huge rallies in Jakarta, a truly massive mobilization.
He describes it almost as a spiritual awakening. He was a young guy back then, stuck in a low-paying admin job, feeling powerless and invisible. And then suddenly, he's standing at the National Monument in a sea of millions of people dressed in white. He said he felt the ground shake. He felt this incredible surge of collective power, of belonging. We're finally making them listen. We're taking our country back.
You can't deny the sheer power of that moment. It was a historic display of collective action.
Let's jump to the present day. Risky is in his 30s now, married, has a couple of kids. They live in a crowded, working-class neighborhood in North Jakarta. And he describes his daily life as a series of small, exhausting battles. He fights with the water pump every morning because the municipal water pressure is non-existent.
The classic problem of failing public infrastructure.
He fights with the chaotic school registration process, trying to get his son a spot in an overcrowded public school. He fights with the public healthcare system, spending hours in queues to get his mother's diabetes medication. It's a daily grind against a system that just doesn't seem to work.
The daily reality for millions.
And Risky rates something that really hit me. He said, "I screamed myself hoarse from my beliefs at 212. I felt like a giant that day. But today, 7 years later, the water pipe in my alley is still broken." He said, "The protest was a success. We got the governor we wanted out, but it didn't fix the pipes."
And that right there is the absolute heart of the tragedy. It's what the research calls the gap between procedural democracy and substantive results.
The procedure worked. People gathered, they protested, they had a political impact. Why didn't that translate into substantive results like better public services for Risky?
There's a really sharp analysis in the stack here, the effectiveness of political identity in post-212 movement. And it asks that brutal question, did this massive movement produce policy, or did it just produce political theater?
And what's the verdict?
The verdict is pretty stark. The movement was incredibly effective at one thing, mobilizing people around a shared religious and political identity. It could get millions of bodies into the street to defend a symbol, to express collective outrage, but it was never designed to be a policy negotiating body.
It wasn't a movement about urban planning or bureaucratic reform.
It wasn't about reforming the city's water utility. It was about asserting the power of a specific identity group. And while that terrified politicians, the response was also in the realm of identity.
But surely that fear translated into votes, right? It must have changed the political calculus.
The source looks at the election results that followed in 2019, and it points to the rational voter theory. Despite the passion of 2 and 12, when people got into the voting booth to choose a president, their decisions were surprisingly pragmatic and economic. They voted for the incumbent who they felt was delivering stability and welfare, even if he wasn't the choice of the 212 movement.
So Risky marched with his heart, but he voted with his wallet. Or at least his neighbors did.
Yes. And the political elite learned a valuable lesson from this. They learned that identity-based protests are manageable. You can counter them with your own identity politics. You can make symbolic gestures. You can visit religious leaders. You can give speeches. You can wear the right clothes. That's all relatively easy.
But fixing Risky's water pipes.
Hard. That requires competence. That requires long-term planning. That requires the kind of functional state capacity that, as we saw with Hendra, is fundamentally broken.
I want to go back to that other source.
Yeah.
We are not trained to protest. It uses this incredible analogy. It describes these huge, sporadic Indonesian protests as political malaria.
Political malaria.
Well, think about how malaria works. It's not a chronic, persistent illness. It's a cycle of sudden, violent fevers. One day you're fine, the next day is a raging temperature, you're delirious, shaking, and then the fever breaks, and you're exhausted. But you go back to a semblance of normal.
That is a disturbingly accurate metaphor for our political history. 1998 was a malarial spike. The omnibus law protests were a malarial spike. 212 was a malarial spike.
Right, but a healthy body, a healthy democracy, doesn't function through a series of near-death fevers. It has a robust, everyday immune system.
A low-level, constant, and kind of boring immune response.
Exactly. It has functioning local councils where people can complain about potholes.
Mm-hmm.
It has labor unions that negotiate contracts every year, not just once a decade. It has consumer protection agencies that actually respond to complaints. It has a steady, low-grade fever all the time, which is what keeps it healthy.
But we don't have that. What we have is the curriculum of silence for years on end, where the pressure builds and builds under the surface.
And then it explodes in a malarial fever. We go from total silence to a deafening roar with nothing in between.
And the problem with a malaria spike is that it's utterly draining. After the fever breaks, the body is weak. Risky is tired. He did his part. He marched. He shouted. He felt like he changed the world. He doesn't have the energy or the organization to follow up on the water pipe issue for the next 5 years. The movement dissipates.
And the politicians know exactly how to treat malaria. They're not interested in eradicating the mosquitoes in the swamp. They just want to manage the symptoms. They just want to bring the fever down.
This is the populist trap that the research talks about. How does a smart politician respond to a feverish, angry population? Do they launch a complex 10-year plan for bureaucratic reform and infrastructure overhaul? Oh, it's boring and it won't win the next election.
So they hand out paracetamol.
They hand out political paracetamol, cash subsidies, fuel subsidies, promises of free lunch programs, direct, tangible, photogenic handouts that provide immediate relief. They give Risky a temporary discount on his electricity bill, but they don't fix the underlying power grid.
They give him a bucket of water today instead of fixing the pipe for tomorrow.
It's a perfect loop. The endemic silence breaks state capacity. The broken capacity leads to poor public services. The poor services create widespread anger. That anger explodes in a malarial protest. The political class responds with short-term populist handouts to lower the fever, and once the fever is down, the curriculum of silence resumes.
Leaving Risky still fighting his water pump every morning.
And Dewey still telling her workers to keep their heads down.
And Hendra still watching that highway project rust away.
It's a self-sustaining system, a perfectly closed and perfectly stagnant loop.
So if this is the system, how is it managed? What is the operating system that keeps this loop running? It feels like we need to talk about this concept of the new developmental state.
This is the final crucial piece of the puzzle. This is the ideology and the machinery that underpins the whole thing.
I was reading this paper, Indonesia's New Developmental State, and it's like reading the instruction manual for the system we've just described. It lays out how you can control a massive, diverse country without resorting to the overt, brutal force of the past.
It's control through bureaucracy. Control through paperwork.
Let's use the village law, the Dana Desa, as the prime example. On paper, everyone celebrated this law. It was seen as a massive step for democracy. The central government would send huge sums of money, billions of rupiah, directly to every single one of Indonesia's 75,000 villages.
Power to the people. Decentralization. It sounds like the perfect antidote to the culture of silence. You're literally giving people the resources and the power to fix their own problems.
It sounds like you're finally giving Hendra a voice and a budget. But the paper argues the reality has been the exact opposite. It says the village law has become a sophisticated tool of central government surveillance and control. How can giving people money be a form of control?
It's done through what the paper calls technocratic checking and bureaucratic coercion. Imagine you're a village head. You're a local guy. Maybe you were a farmer before you were elected. Suddenly, Jakarta wires you 1 billion rupiah. It's a huge sum of money. But with that money comes a mountain of rules. To access it, to spend it, and most importantly, to not go to jail for misusing it, you have to navigate an incredibly complex system of reporting.
You have to use special government-designed apps and fill out endless forms.
Endless forms. And you're not alone. The state sends you helpers. They're called village facilitators. Their official job is to help you with planning and administration. But the paper argues their real job is to be compliance engineers.
Their job isn't to help the village realize its own vision. Their job is to ensure the village complies with Jakarta's vision.
And then there's the other figure who's always in the room, mentioned in the source, the babinsa.
The local military officer assigned to every village. A holdover from the new order.
A direct legacy. You're the village head in a meeting. You have the state-appointed facilitator on one side telling you that you need to fill out Form 7C correctly or the funds will be frozen. You have the babinsa on the other side, the symbol of state security, just watching, making sure everything remains stable and orderly. Where in that room is the space for a loud, messy, democratic debate with your actual villagers?
There is no space. The village head is so terrified of making a clerical error and being branded as corrupt that his entire focus shifts. He stops listening to the needs of his community.
He starts listening only to the demands of the bureaucracy above him.
This is what the paper calls upward accountability.
That's the key phrase. The village head is no longer accountable to the people who elected him. He is accountable to the ministry in Jakarta that controls the money. The entire system of local democracy has been hollowed out from the inside. It's been transformed into an administrative arm of the central state.
It's a genius form of control. You don't need to ban village meetings, you just make them irrelevant. You bury everyone in so much technical procedure that they have neither the time nor the energy for genuine political debate.
And you wrap the whole thing in the noble-sounding ideology of development and good governance. If a villager complains that the process is too complicated, they're not being democratic, they're being difficult, they're impeding progress.
It's the same logic that silenced Hendra. Don't be an enemy of development.
The ideology of this new developmental state is clear. The legitimacy of the state comes from its ability to deliver economic growth, not from its adherence to democratic processes.
Basically, the social contract is, we will deliver 5% GDP growth, and in return, you will sit down and be quiet.
That's the deal on the table.
So this brings everything together. This entire system, this new developmental state, it runs on the curriculum of silence. It requires it. It functions most efficiently when its citizens behave as spectators.
Look at the state's goal: speed, investment, building things fast, getting that nickel smelter built, getting that eco-city launched. Friction is the enemy.
And what is democracy but a form of friction?
It's organized friction. A complaint from Hendra about bad cement, that's friction. It would halt the project. A strike from Dewey for better wages. That's friction. It would scare away investors. A demand from Risky for better public services. That's friction. It would divert funds from a high-profile national project.
So the state has engineered a system to minimize that friction. It has trained its citizens, from the classroom to the village hall, to be quiet spectators who are meant to applaud the macroeconomic numbers from the sidelines.
And to never, ever question why the stadium they're sitting in has cracks in the foundation.
It's an incredibly effective machine for a certain kind of progress. You can't deny the visible development, the new airports, the new roads. It works.
It works until the day it doesn't.
Until the highway collapses.
Until the malarial fever spikes so high that the populist paracetamol doesn't work anymore.
That's the fundamental bet the system is making. It's betting that it can purchase silence with stability, that it can trade Hendra's voice for a new road, trade Dewey's rights for a steady job, and trade Risky's clean water for a cash handout.
But what all this research suggests is that this is not a sustainable trade. You cannot run a complex, modern state without a functioning nervous system. You can't fly a 747 on autopilot with all the sensors turned off. Eventually, you need someone like Hendra to be able to tell you that the engine is on fire.
And if you spent 50 years teaching Hendra that raising an alarm is the worst possible sin, he's just going to sit there and watch it burn.
That is the deep structural risk of the curriculum. The silence isn't just maintaining social harmony, it's actively concealing systemic failure.
We started this deep dive with that colleague of mine in the break room, the man who was full of fire 1 second and then just bowed his head.
And now we understand him. He's not a coward, he is a star graduate of the curriculum.
We've seen how that learned submission Hendra's silence allows the physical body of the state, its infrastructure, to literally rot from within.
And at the same time, we see how another form of that submission, Dewey's pragmatic silence, is the very thing that attracts the foreign capital that acts as the lifeblood of the economy.
And finally, we see how the rare attempts to break that silence, like Risky's passionate protests, are so often channeled into identity-based fevers that burn hot and fast, but fail to produce the substantive long-term change that's needed.
It's a system where the silence isn't a bug, it's the core feature. It's the fuel that keeps the entire machine running.
And until that machine can learn to run on a different kind of fuel, on the friction and feedback of genuine participation, the pipes in Risky's neighborhood are going to stay broken.
And the monument to silence in Hendra's village will continue to stand.